One. Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light, and this is my podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody. Today, my co host is Jory. Can you say hi, Jory?
Hey, everybody, what's going on?
For those of you who are new or who do not know, Jory is my son. And the reason I have picked Jory as one of my co hosts is because that I trust his opinion and his relaying of experiences completely, and we have experienced things together. I also picked my UK co-host for the same reason, that I trust his opinion and his experiences and his insight. Today, I'd also like to welcome moderator Maya. So everybody, be nice to moderator Maya. And to producer Jeremy, who you cannot hear, but you may hear me having a conversation that you can't hear, one-sided, and that is when I talk to Jeremy in my ear. I'm not crazy. Well, no, I'm not
That's
crazy.
debatable. That's debatable.
Today's podcast is about demons. And we're going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about demons. We're going to ask, are demons fact or fiction? And you guys can leave comments and ask questions. And there's a likelihood that I might not be able to see them in real time, but moderator Maya will see them. There's questions that moderator Maya can answer. And there's things that she can relay to me if we need to address the topic at the time. Otherwise, at the end of the podcast, we will have a question and answer period where we discuss any of your experiences, any of your questions, any of your comments, and are happy to hear your opinions on the fact or fiction. Are you ready, Jer?
I am ready.
Okay, so today we're going to cover the religious history of demons. We're going to talk about possession, exorcism, mental health issues, and neurological issues that were previously and currently called demon possession. And I'm going to list for you a list of religious demons from many different religions, and I'll talk about those and see what you guys think about these demons that you probably want to run into in the middle of the night. And that is if I can bring my list up.
Well, while you're looking for it, Rob wants you to know that you're a loony.
Well, this is true.
You're not saying anything we didn't already know.
Right. Just Jory?
Yeah.
Go ahead and get started on a topic you want to talk about because I cannot get to my list.
Well, what are you doing? This is your podcast.
I know. I do not know what's happening here.
Okay. Well, I guess we can go into a history of demons. Let me pull it up. Help you out here.
Okay.
So, the term demon comes from a Greek word and is implying a supernatural and often malevolent being prevalent in religion, occultism, literature, fiction, mythology, and folklore. So, in ancient Near Eastern religions, as well as several other traditions, a demon is considered a harmful spiritual entity below the heavenly planes, which may cause demonic possession. And a demon is believed to be a spiritual entity that may be conjured and controlled by people who would consider themselves sorcerers or who dwell in the arts of the black magics.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about demons throughout history from different religions. Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to start with the incubus. An incubus is a male demon that appears to women while they're sleeping and then attacks the woman. Um, I'm not going to get graphic with wording because I don't want to have this video shut down, but we're just going to say he attacks her physically, okay? And the incubus is what the movie The Entity was based on. That woman, which was based on a real case, was attacked physically, held down. And I think that was the first time that I ever put a name to a type of demon. And
well, if we want to just throw it out there for your listeners, because there's two. There's an incubus and a succubus.
Yes.
And these are what people consider demonic entities they're not typical in the sense that if you believe in a demonic entity feeding on fear or insecurities, these demons feed off of sexual energy.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is Legion, which I have actually done a story about. And Legion is have you ever heard the term the phrase I am Legion? Jory?
Yes.
Okay.
It's yeah, in a lot of exorcism cases in Hollywood movies.
Yes. So what that is signifying the solidarity of a particular group. So, in the movies, and I don't know if in an actual exorcism, but they ask the demon their name because in order to cast him out, they ask them their name. And in some cases, they say, I am Legion, which means many demons. In the Bible, Jesus came across an unnamed man who is plagued by a demon. He performs an exorcism, and in order to cast the demon out, he asks it for its name. And the demon responds, my name is Legion, for we are many, which is a particularly scary thought. If I had to have a favorite demon, I think Legion is one of the scariest kind. And then there is one that's called the Asag. And this one is a Sumerian demon. And it's a mountain who somehow gets women to procreate with him and create rock children. And then they attack and kill people who climb onto the mountain. That's weird and strange. There's one called the Dybuck, which is a demon from the Judaic history. And this one is a demon that clings to the soul of a living person and inhabits their body. Dybucks are said to be the souls of those.
Dybuck
Go ahead.
I mean, interrupt you, Mom. Is that Dybuck or Dybbuk?
It could be Dybbuk. It could be Dybbuk.
I don't want our listeners to be like Dybuck.
Okay. So it's spelled Dybbbuk.
BBUK.
Yeah, Dybbbuk. So it could be.
It might be because there's a very, very popular paranormal story about the Dybbuk box, and it's about a Jewish, what would be considered a demon in the Jewish tradition being attached to that box.
Oh. Okay, well then let's call it a Dybbuk.
Okay.
But this one says that they are souls who cannot pass onto the afterlife because of how evil they are. So they enter a person when they have sinned and have not asked for forgiveness yet, leaving the door open for a demonic possession. So which is weird that this is a Jewish type of demon, because I think that I was raised with a very strict evangelical um, basis. And that was thought to be something that could happen, if you didn't ask forgiveness when you sinned or right afterwards, that was an opening for the demon to come in and possess you, or, so I think that might be a crossover between Jewish and Christianity, which would make sense considering we have the Old Testament too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys, you're gonna have to forgive me. My internet is not working out very well. Hold on one second. Go ahead, Jory. Talk about something while I try and figure this out.
Well, I'll talk about the Dybbuk box since we're talking about Jewish demons. So this was an object that supposedly was owned by a Jewish woman during the Holocaust, and she claimed that when she experienced a demonic entity in Poland, she was able to trap it in her jewelry box. And she brought it with her overseas to America after World War II. And when she passed away, her family was very quick to get rid of it, and it went into an auction. And a gentleman who owned a thrift store bought it at auction, thinking he could make some kind of profit off of it. And when he couldn't sell it, he thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just give it to my mom as a birthday present because she likes these kind of knickknacks. Well, when he gave it to her and she opened it, she had a seizure, which she described as, prior to experiencing the seizure, when she opened the box, the cold air came from it and overwhelmed her with a sense of dread and evil. And then she had her seizure. And everybody who's been in possession of this box since then has claimed to have had extreme paranormal experiences, from hair loss to nightmares to bodily harm to weird smells to insect infestations to feeling oppressed. And they believe that it's because of this Dybbuk, this Jewish demon, that it feeds off of these people, their energy, and torments them and ultimately tries to kill them, is my understanding anyways.
Okay. I'll skip that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I would skip it too.
Okay, so the next one is okay, now you can tell me if I'm saying this wrong. Rangda?
I will let you figure that one out. What is
Okay.
it? What is it? What kind of a demon?
This is a Balinese demon, and it's closely tied to Hinduism. And this demon's a woman who thirsts for revenge and eats children. She has supernatural powers and commands an army of witches.
Ooh.
Yeah, that is a particularly scary type of demon. And then there is Abaddon. For the record, I also did a story about Abaddon very recently. Abaddon is a Christian demon whose name means destroyer. Abaddon rules over a bottomless pit and commands an army of locusts to torment anyone who does not have the symbol of God on their forehead. I'm more afraid of I'm pretty afraid of locusts. So, yeah.
You and farmers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm supposed to read Rob's question. So Rob, what's your question? Question, Tracy. If there was no religion, would there be demons? Can one exist without the other? Oh, Rob, I'm coming up to that. Yes, I'm gonna ask about that. So keep a pin in that, and if I forget, please ask me again because I do want to talk about that. Um, then there is Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles is said to be Lucifer's right hand man. Mephistopheles does the devil's bidding. Although Mephistopheles is not mentioned in the Bible, and he doesn't come about until he's in a, a book written by Faust. So he's we hear about Mephistopheles I as a super demon all the time, but the reality is he's not even a he comes from German folklore, so it's not per se a religious demon because he isn't in any religious writings. Faust spoke about him in a book, and he has become one of the most famous and talked about demons, though. And then there is the succubus, which Jory has explained to you, except for this one is a female, and she's not violent like the incubus. She's more of a seductress. And then there's the Jikini. Okay, here we go. Jikininki, which is Japanese Buddhism, and it's a cannibalistic demon. So it feeds on the flesh of wicked people. And that sounds like something a demon would do. Then there's Andress, who is a woman with a human body, wings, and an owl's head. And it's a he. And he rides a wolf and carries a saber. He harnesses anger and some.
He
Yes, it
with a
has
woman's body.
It has a woman's body, it has wings, an owl's head, and it's a he.
So does he, when he rides around, does he stop and ask people if they assumed his gender?
He probably rides around and asks and refuses to ask for directions.
Excuse me. Do you have a woman's body and a bird head? Did you just assume my gender?
Well,
I'm a man. Don't you assume who I am?
He's probably refusing to ask how to get there. And he rides on a wolf.
That's what I'm talking about.
He carries a saber, and he causes people to become angry with each other, harnesses the anger, and then kills you.
Ooh. I like this one. I'll take that demon.
Okay.
I'm going to put him on my Monopoly board.
Okay. Then there are the 3 Gorgons, which I love this one. This is Greek mythology. There were 3 Gorgon sisters. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to butcher this, but there's Stheno, Uriel, and the most famous sister of all, Medusa.
Ooh.
Stheno and Uriel were immortal. And of course, all 3 of them had hair made of snakes. And they would try to get you to look directly into their eyes so they could be turned into stone. There's the Rakshasa. And these are shape-shifting Hindu demons. They're large and beast-like, with long fangs and claws. They prey at night, feasting on humans and sucking cows dry of their milk. Oh. Because after a long night of eating a human, you're thirsty. And I believe that is that. But then I want to talk about Lilith, because I don't think we can mention demons without talking about our dear friend Lilith. Lilith is said to be Adam's first wife. Adam wasn't particularly fond of Lilith because Lilith demanded that she be treated equally and not as something less than Adam. So, in Genesis 1:27 it says, "And God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them." And then later it goes to say that he created Eve out of Adam's rib. So this is where the thought is that he did create a woman first out of the dust with Adam, and then later on created Eve. And it's thought that Bible scholars took this part out of the Bible because they didn't want to have a woman in the Bible who refused to not be treated as less than a man. Lilith was said to have been kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and there's two ways of thinking about Lilith. Some people say that Lilith left the Garden of Eden and immediately went to Satan, which, in my personal opinion, wouldn't have worked out because Satan hadn't been kicked out of heaven yet. But there were people in the land of Nod already, and there were the fallen angels. So she could have gone to the land of Nod and the fallen angels, and it was those people that procreated, and made the Nephilim, which are, of course, the giants, half human, half angel in the Bible. And I think that Lilith is a fascinating story. I think that, there are strong women in the Bible, but they are always subservient to men, and Lilith was not. And so Lilith got to go her own way. But she's one of my favorite. They call her a demon, and I don't know. I guess people think she's a demon. Those who think she left and went directly to Satan would refer to her as a demon. But if she went to the land of Nod and the fallen angels, I don't think we would call her a demon. But there you go. That is a list of several demons from several religions. And okay, so what we'll do, let's talk about this real quick since Rob brought up the question. Without religion, would there be demons? Every known civilization in some way comes to the belief that there is something greater than them, that there's some type of god or gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that being true, even without having a well-established religion like Christianity or Muslims or Judaism, every civilization does come to the conclusion that there is something greater than them. So I don't know how you would know if without religion if there would be demons, because if you believe in something good, do you then automatically believe in something bad that you would call a demon? Or in some civilizations, do they just think that that's God being mad at them, and maybe they don't believe in demons then?
It's a tough one. I don't necessarily think you need religion to have demons, because, and I know we'll touch more about it later on, but some people believe in demons more as non-human entities, in the sense that they were souls that were never alive to begin with. They've never been flesh and blood. So when you put it in that sense, it doesn't really require a belief in a god or gods to have a spiritual world. I think it helps to have a belief in your understanding of what you're dealing with. If you're in a situation where you're encountering blah 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 negative forces, But I guess you could also look at the other flip of the coin. Like, is there demonic activity, or have you done something to anger your God, and your God is punishing you too? I don't know. I don't think you do. Like, I don't think you really need. I don't. I think that demons and religion get mixed up a lot because religion explains demons on a level that we can understand. Like in Christianity, demons are fallen angels cast out of heaven for
Mm-hmm.
disobeying God. In other religions, they are just the metamorphosis of bad human beings who have become powerful negative entities who torment you, or they're already entities that have been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, like that mountain demon that procreates with women and creates little rock monsters.
Yeah.
I think if we didn't have religion, we would probably still be sitting around today wondering what these negative entities that we are encountering are. We wouldn't have a name to it. But I don't think that religion is what gives it power, so to speak.
Well, this goes into the conversation you wanted to have about is it something that's religious, or is it a human or inhuman type of energy?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's human instinct to look for a reason in things. So if something terrible happens, then it's a human instinct to justify it. Well, that happened because this, so that it won't happen to me. So I think that to say, like, and I'm going to get into this, I'm going to get into this later, like um, some mental health issues, or um, to say, or let's say a serial killer, to say, well, that happened because he's abnormal and is demon possessed. I am not capable of that. I think that makes us feel safe to always have an other. And in this case, to have, if somebody does something that is so horrendous that it can't be explained, I think it makes us feel safe to believe it has to be something motivating him, something taken over them, something that can't happen to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to preface this by saying I do believe that there are demons. So we are doing a fact or fiction because I want to present both sides of the possibilities that there's no demons and there's mental illness instead. Um, so give me some room here. But I do, and this is sort of the devil's advocate thing, is that I think that even without a religion, we would, if no religion existed, there is a good and there's a bad. And I don't think we like to say that person is bad just because then we could be bad just because. And it helps to have a buffer that there's a reason, something causing it. So I do believe that it might not be called demon, because there are religions that believe that they're the demons that we think of as possessing a body or causing harm. They don't believe in those type of demons. They believe that there's demons that cause illness, that the reason people become ill and die is because of a demon. So I think that irregardless, at some point, they're going to be pointing a finger at something.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and they might not call it a demon. I mean, they might not think of it as a figure or something almost tangible that you could see, but but an energy that goes into this person that causes them to be ill, for instance.
Well, I think that was definitely, at least, maybe not, well, at least maybe not so much now, but definitely I would probably say, if you want to strip us back to when we were first roaming this planet, we had no idea, I mean, to this day, we're still asking the same questions, but you got to imagine then when there's no fire, there's no electricity, there's no nothing. You have to survive off the land, and you have to ask yourself, why is this person acting the way, like, why are they foaming at the mouth? Why are they seizing? You start to create these superstitions. Oh, it must be evil spirits, it must be demons. And as time evolves, you start getting into the times of the Roman Empire, the times of the plague and the Renaissance, and leading up to the American Revolution and so on and so forth. You see this evolution of religion saying whatever ails you is Satan and his demonic power, and the only thing that will heal you, whether you have the plague, you have the sniffles, your stomach hurts, whatever ails you, you give yourself to God, because it's only Satan that's hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that time it made sense. When you don't have a microscope to look under and see, oh, this organism is attacking this organism, that's why I'm sick. It makes sense to believe, oh, if I just give myself to a higher power that's good, the lower power that's evil will stop hurting me.
Well, the oldest belief in demonic possession goes back to the Sumerians, and they believed that all diseases, whether it be of the mind or body, were called by sickness demons. So, I mean, that goes way, way, way back, and it's interesting because they would do exorcisms for these. So, but they had someone who was called a Ashipu do the exorcism, and they were the word Ashipu means sorcerer. But on the other hand, they also had people who were called the Asu, and those were physicians. So they didn't have the doctor treat the illness. They had the sorcerer treat the illness. So that plays into what you were saying about that being believed that it has to be something of a different power that's coming in, so that the doctor wasn't even involved in getting rid of this illness. It was the sorcerer exorcising this illness, the sickness demon out. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense. When you're living in a world where you can't make sense of it, it helps you sleep better at night, to believe that as much as there is evil out there, there's something good out there. That good must have created you. That good must want you to be here for a reason. And if you focus on that good, the evil will be kept at bay. And that, I believe personally, that's what sprung into people's belief in magic and gods, and eventually what turned into Christianity, and the belief in one God and Jesus and Satan and his demons
and witches,
so on and so forth, and witches. And to this day, there's a huge chunk of the world that still believes more in using witch doctors and shamans and Wiccans to go to them and get their medical services from people who practice magic rather than medicine.
Okay, well, that leads me into this. In shamanic cultures, so like Native Americans, cultures that have and use shamans, the shaman will do a demon possession exorcism act to get rid of a disease, because they attribute this disease to a vengeful spirit or somebody that wished a vengeful spirit upon you. So it's the shaman, the spiritual leader, not a doctor. Well, shamans are doctors, but they lean towards the spiritual in their healing. And it's the shaman in those tribes, which is their version of the healer, who will get rid of the demon. And they think that these demons show up if they saw an unusual animal that shouldn't be there at the same time of year, like if they saw a bear that they wouldn't normally see, or a wolf comes into their camp, they would see that as the appearance of a demon. And if people got sick, then it was because that was the demon that brought the illness. And then in that case, a shaman would need to perform the exorcism to get rid of that illness that the demon brought in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really interesting to see that in different cultures, it's the spiritual healers who take on these cases rather than what we would consider like regular medicine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do like the consistency of every culture experiencing virtually the same thing when it comes to what they believe demonic is a evil entity, a demonic entity. Um, it's almost the same thing when you not to change subjects, but it's almost the same thing as like a alien encounter from back in those times. There's a lot of consistency from our ancestors in all parts of the world of what they were encountering at that time. So there's a lot of credibility in terms of, you take a text from what happened to somebody and what would have been England, and at the same time period something in China, and break it down. Um, you can see that they were experiencing the same things. They just explained it differently because of their cultures, and not
Yes.
saying that it wasn't medical or it was demonic or whatever. But it's nice to see a consistency across the board that does lend credibility to perhaps there being proof that people were
Yes.
encountering evil entities.
Yeah, you're right. I like that. I I like that you zeroed in on that throughout all these cultures spread across the world, they're the same stories of what they've encountered. And therefore, in my belief, that is something that cannot be disregarded. They had no way to communicate, and they're still having these same kind of experiences. And I agree. I think that lends a certain level of proof to the idea that they were experiencing these things, that these things exist. And I know I've told the story before on here, but I'm gonna tell it again. I experienced something that I cannot deny happening. I experienced that I was physically harmed, that my family saw me being physically scratched. We weren't, there was nothing happening in the room in our conversation that would invoke what would be called a demon. Okay. There was, and I've told this before, but for people who haven't heard the story, there was a break in the news, and it was late at night, and the president was going to speak. So I knew that it was going to be something that we needed to hear. It was kind of, you don't have the president break in at 11 o'clock at night and not have some sort of a, oh God, what's happening? Sinking feeling in your stomach, right? So I had the kids come in because I said, come watch this. It's got to be historical. And it had nothing, there was no talk about, because we do talk about scary things that have happened to us and occurrences that we've seen, things we do talk about those, but this was not one of those times. Nothing to invoke violence. And I felt a burning sensation on my side. It was, well, there's no other way to describe it than burning. I lifted up my shirt, and along my ribs were 3 very distinct scratches. And while I said, look at that, I wonder where that came from, 3 more very distinct scratches happened in real time across them that was drawing blood, and it was painful. And then it happened again. I ran to my husband and I said, something's happening to me. I don't know what you're going to do about it, but something's happening to me. And I guess I thought I need somebody else to witness this. I even though, what your siblings had just seen it. I needed like an adult to say, I see you going through this. Because otherwise, I thought maybe I would eventually excuse it as having a reason. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he saw 3 more scratches start with nothing and then come up scratches at about, I would say, 2.5 inches long. All of these scratches were, and start bleeding. And I, I don't know how else to explain that other than something demonic. There is, in my mind, there's not a mental illness to explain that. There's was nobody physically standing there scratching me. And to have something intentionally cause me harm and not be afraid to have the rest of the people in the house see what was happening, it was one of the most frightening things I've ever gone through. And I don't know how to explain it other than to say that it was a demon. And other people have had those experiences. Other people have claimed to have those same things. And I always say this in all of my podcasts. I am so cynical. I want to see it happen. I want to see you get scratched before I believe you. So I know that people could think I'm a lunatic. But when you experience yourself, there's no other explanation. So when other people around the world in the times where we didn't have the communication we have now, were experiencing things like that, I think that you're right when you say that has to be proof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fact or fiction? Sorry, I'm going more on the fact part. Anyway, what else do you want to talk about? Oh, go ahead. Do you want to talk about the case that inspired The Exorcist?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or did you want to talk about something else first? Do you want to talk about the energy aspect? Is it dark energy?
Well, I was just gonna say, since we're still more on the historical aspect of demons, to try and put it under a microscope, do you believe them to be, in a religious sense, fallen angels? Or do you try to, I guess, as scientifically as possible, put it in a way that they're more of an inhuman entity in the sense that um, this is just a spiritual energy that has not experienced being flesh and blood, and we don't actually have a real term to give it yet, and it's lashing out against us. It doesn't know how to, I shouldn't say doesn't know how to, it wants to experience what it's like to be us, but it doesn't have a soul.
So what is it? Because we can measure the energy. You can measure the energy.
What is it? Yeah.
So what would it be then?
For me, it's difficult because when you say fallen angel, these when you look at angels, they were created by God to assist him and to assist us. And these fallen angels were supposedly cast out of heaven because they disagreed with the Lord. But in the end, they're still angels. And Lucifer himself is still an angel, an archangel. And he might be in hell, but he's still an angel. So I don't know if it's just the human part of me that wants to believe that they might be casted out from heaven, but that doesn't necessarily mean that now they're these demonic creatures that want to destroy humans and bring harm to humans, you know? Um, but at the same time, then what is a demon if it's not a fallen angel? Then what is it? What is that evil energy that infests our homes, infests our bodies, does bodily harm to us, possesses us, claims, at least when they're battling an exorcist, claims to be from hell, that they serve Lucifer. They can quote scripture. It's just hard to know for sure what they are. We know they're evil and they know they intend us harm, but outside of that, we don't know what they are. You there, Mom?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Once again, during
Okay.
a podcast, my mic stopped working. Sorry about that.
I was like, I guess I'm just talking to
every
myself.
time. It happened last week with Rob too. I don't know. I don't even touch that page and it turns the mic off. That is so weird. Well, okay, so yes, to think that an angel who is created by God and ideally perfect then does a 180 and becomes something that their sole purpose is to cause harm to not just adults even, but to children.
Right.
I had never thought of it that way, Jory. That was very deep. Like, why would they just being cast out? You can be mad. I mean, obviously they wouldn't be thrilled about that, although it was their choice. Biblically speaking, there was a war in heaven, and they chose what side to go on.
Well, yeah, and you know, in the end, they were cast out of heaven and sent to hell, but they're still angels. It's they like a lot of what is popular belief is they go through this transformation of being holy and true into being these unclean, filthy, disgusting creatures. But
Yeah, they go from being beautiful. Satan was the most beautiful angel.
right.
If we saw him right now, he would be beautiful.
And his name translates to him being the light bringer. He's the bringer of light.
Yes, the morning star.
The morning star. And so yes, like yeah, they were casted out of heaven, and Lucifer has a place in hell. But does that do they change? They're still angels. They were still created for a purpose. And they might be mad at God. I would probably be mad at my dad if he kicked me out of my house. But would I really spend eternity just randomly picking humans one at a time and just picking on them and then possessing them and crying about it?
Right, but on the other hand, Job, that's exactly what happened to Job, right? God and Satan had a bet. And Satan said that Job would turn his back on God, and God bet that he wouldn't. So Satan put Job through a literal hell on earth, tore everything away from him, his family, his money, his health, everything away to show God that he would turn his back on him. Of course, Job did not. But in the meantime, God let Job go through that to be tested, to see if Satan could win a bet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that he's incapable of that. And maybe that's what's happening, is maybe they're testing, maybe it's a test of faith or.
Well, you got to keep in context too. Lucifer's role was to test humanity for God. His role was to be like, hey, look what you can do over here if you just forget about that old crazy guy in the sky.
Right.
And he continues to do that now. So is he really only just doing what he was supposed to be doing in the first place?
Yes.
Created by God.
Well, yes, that's the thing. Okay, we're going to get deep into, we're going to go off into the weeds right now. Well, that's the thing. That's what confuses me about biblical stories in the first place, is the fact that God's intention, as you can see by the Bible, is that there will be a war in the end of times. So in reality, Satan was doing just exactly what God intended for him to do. And God intended for Eve to get Adam to eat the fruit in the Garden of Eden. And Judas, from before Judas was a twinkle in anybody's eye, before God created the earth, the purpose of Judas was to turn his back on Jesus. So how can they be punished when their purpose on this earth really had no free will? There was no free will, or the Bible wouldn't have gone the way the Bible went. How could Judas go to hell for
Right.
serving God's sole purpose for his life?
Right.
So, yes, Satan, Lucifer, performed his role that was meant for him.
Mm-hmm.
There was no free will. That was his role in life, was to be cast out of heaven and his angels, and then to do whatever they do here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's confusing to me. That confuses me. That confuses me a lot, because you think, I think we talked about that one day, that what if a serial killer kills the daughter of a man, and that man goes on to, okay, she was a single, okay, a serial killer kills the daughter of a man. That man goes on to find a drug or the gene in a brain that causes people to be serial killers, and he finds this gene, separates it, and we are able to test in the womb if a child has this gene and to change it. So in that case, it wasn't the original serial killer who killed his daughter, who caused him and pushed him forward to do this research. Didn't he serve his purpose?
If you believe in humans having fate, then yes, he served his purpose.
All right. Anyway, okay, so let's go back onto some our fiction stuff. What do you think?
Some more fact or fiction demons.
Yeah. Let's talk about the case that inspired The Exorcist.
Yes, let's do so. Modernize our demons.
Yeah, modernize them. Let's bring them
Modernize the
up.
demons. Let's bring them forward to present day, shall we?
Now, this case was actually about, as you know, a boy, but it was in the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, it was about a boy who originally his parents just thought he was sick, and as they were treating him, they were noticing that he was speaking in tongues, that his body movements were not normal, and I do believe they ended up taking him to a hospital where even the doctors and the nurses couldn't figure out what was wrong with him.
Right.
And they eventually had to bring in the church, and the church had to perform an exorcism on him. And present during this exorcism was the author of the book, The Exorcist.
Right.
Of course, he changed a few details around. But it was that exorcism, that him watching this boy going through the ordeal of having a demonic attachment, I think it's what helped bring, because up to that point, exorcism was something that was known but not really talked about because of its stigmata of what it was. And so when the author created the book, which then became a popular movie, I think that's what helped bring a main media look at exorcism, and made people start to understand more about what exorcism was, what demons were, and we started to understand what a demon possession is. Because up to that point, we still were having a hard time separating what is a demon possession and what we would consider maybe a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think ultimately, I think that's the roots of when we started to be like, when do we stop believing it being a demonic possession and believing it to be mental illness, or vice versa? When do we start believing it to be a demon possession when we can see it's not a mental illness? And it
Right.
changed, that book and that movie changed the landscape of what we believed in up to that point in demons and exorcisms entirely.
Well, the author, when he was asked later if that boy, did you mention how old he was?
I think
He
he
was
was
14.
was he a teen? Okay.
Yeah, he was 14.
Okay.
Um, well, that boy, like you said, had been taken to the hospital, and um, some other kind of a pastor had seen him and said, this is too much for me, and asked to call in the Catholic Church for this. So the author, when asked later if this boy, who they called Roland Doe
Mm-hmm.
or Robbie, he said this in 2013. And okay, so he said this. He emphasized that definitive proof that the boy known as Robbie was possessed by malevolent spirits is unattainable. Maybe he instead suffered from a mental illness or sexual abuse or fabricated the entire experience. Well, that's interesting to say after you've made all this money, right?
Well, I think what he was trying to say was he can't actually give you proof that this child was demonically possessed, especially in 2013 when we're so advanced now when it comes to understanding more of what the human psyche can and can't handle, um, in terms of, let's say that boy was sexually abused or physically abused or mentally abused. Maybe that was his way of functioning through it. He didn't know how to handle being sexually abused or whatever. So I think what he was trying to say was him coming into it was, kind of the tail end of what this boy's ordeal was.
Yeah, but at the time he wrote the book, he wrote it as a fact. And then later on in his life, as he got older, he said that, maybe not so much. And then he also, when asked, he responded that he would not go on record saying that it was true, that he never made an absolute statement that it was true because he'd never felt like he was qualified to make that statement. Although one could argue that his book pretty well stated that it was true.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
it's
maybe at
interesting
the
to
time
me.
of writing it too, he believed it 100% because he wrote it in the 60s.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
him in the 60s, when we don't have that kind of technology and that kind of medicine to help us through with what he experienced, he probably 100% believed when he wrote that book, what he saw was a demonic possession.
Yeah. And then came later into life to understand that there were other things that could be explained by what was happening. Now,
Mm-hmm.
apparently this boy had he had scratches come up on his skin that spelled words.
Mm-hmm.
And later people said that it could have been that he had done them himself because they were on reachable spots of his body, even though his hands were tied behind his back. They disclaimed that a lot of the stuff they said had actually happened and not in the way that it happened. Like, maybe they had exaggerated a little bit and when they were retelling their stories. So stuff happened, but maybe he scratched himself and wrote hell and Satan on his stomach or his back. And I think he wrote hell and Christ. And they think that it's possible that the way his hands were positioned that he probably could have done that himself. But I imagine that in the midst of what was happening and in the face that the doctors didn't know what was happening and even the doctors were thinking this kid is possessed and you have the priest coming in believing he's possessed, I can imagine that a hysteria breaks out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, everything is crazy and real. And years later, when you play it back in your mind, you can see that you might have been caught up
Mm-hmm.
in the moment. And I think that that's what they eventually came to believe, was that it was possible that they had been caught up in the moment, and that there were excuses for what was happening, because this kid went on to live a completely normal life.
Well, that's entirely possible, but I think a lot of us also are quick to jump to say, "Oh, that didn't happen," because we don't want it to be real.
Yeah.
Um, I certainly don't like the aspect of knowing that any day now a demonic entity could possess me and I could cause harm to my friends and my family. So I think it's just as easy to say it did happen as it is to say it didn't happen, because you don't want it to be real. You want to say, "Oh, well, he could have created all those marks himself." It's just as easy to say that as it is to say that, "Oh, well, there's no way he could have because he had his hands tied."
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't. It's hard for me to say because obviously neither one of us were there. Um, I would like to believe it's true, because I don't think people see something like that and can actually say, oh, "Man, that has to be something medical. That has to be something scientific going on with that boy." What he went through, which was described later in the book through Regan, to me seems way more off kilter than just having mental issues.
Well, and um, they said that he moved furniture, that he hurled objects from the wall, pictures and whatnot, from the walls and threw them around. And that's not something that you can do
Right.
yourself well as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That he didn't do it. I'm sorry. I want to make that clear. He didn't do it. While he was in the room, furniture was being moved across the room. Things were being thrown, and as the deep guttural demon voice was coming out of him. So there were people who were there who still stand by the fact that was impossible to be a trick.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean I think that's one of those things that, or we're never really gonna know, right?
Yeah, I think unless you're in a room and you see it happen yourself, it's so hard to. I mean, we kind of discussed it with the demon house when we talked about how the boy was able to walk up backwards up a wall. I don't. It's just without actually being there and seeing it for yourself. I don't think. And even then, when you see it, would you even really truly know? Like, would you be able to say 100%? I think
Well,
that.
I think if I saw a boy walking up backwards on a wall, I could say with 100% clarity that that wasn't normal.
Well, you could
That he
also
couldn't
say
have done that.
he was bit by a spider, and now he's Spider Man.
I suppose I could. Um, but I mean, coupled with the way that that kid had been acting, he wasn't just he had been acting out and had other things happen to him.
Mm-hmm.
Coupled with that, seeing and the voice that was coming out of him, seeing him walk backwards up a wall, which is physically impossible to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can deny that. And there were educated people in that room, psychiatrists, the nurses, educated, the social worker, educated people. We're not talking about tribes here, that saw this happen and automatically came to the conclusion that this was a demon. So,
Yeah.
in a more recent case than that, I I trust that these people, what they're saying that they saw, you know, it's kind of disheartening to see that the people in this in the exorcism case, that some of them are backing out of it, you know, mostly. That's kind of disheartening, because if you saw it, say you saw it, don't back out of it. If you saw furniture flying across the room, you saw furniture flying across the room.
Oh,
You
I would
can't
talk
say
about
that
that
that's
all
a
the time.
me too. You can't say that, oh yeah, because like there's a quote here where they call this somebody, skeptic Joe Nickel wrote that this kid was childishly simple, that these tricks were childishly simple to fake. I I don't know how to fake moving furniture across the room. Do you?
Well, I am not an engineer, but there is a way to do it, but I don't think they had the capabilities in that hospital in the 1940s to fake move furniture around a room.
Yeah, on without notice, by the way. They just moved this kid to the room.
Right. It would have to be a very specific situation. Because I've seen videos where people have built entire rooms and then have been able to manipulate everything in the room with technology. But this was a hospital that this kid was moved into that room without a head notice, without notice. So for him to
Yeah.
be able to, or not him specifically, but for furniture to be manipulated with nobody touching it at that time, that has to be supernatural.
Yeah. I just don't know what else you would call it.
Same here.
So I just wish that the people who were there wouldn't, maybe they were, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they, like you said, it was, that statement was in 2013, but you can't, I don't know. I just ignore the fact that you saw furniture move across the room.
Yeah.
But regardless, he came to believe that possibly this kid was just, I don't know, being a trickster is one of the quotes. That's some kind of trickery right there. Um, so while we're talking about exorcisms, I'm gonna read about the different kind of exorcisms that religions have. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. And I want to talk about this real quick too. That requested and performed exorcisms began to decline in the United States by the 18th century, and they rarely occurred until the latter half of the 20th century, when the public saw a sharp rise due to the media attention exorcism started getting. There was a 50% increase in the number of exorcisms performed between the early 1960s and the mid 70s. That is crazy to me to think that 50% rise in the 70s. That's recent enough history, right?
Mm-hmm.
To think that's and in a time where people did recognize mental illness, right?
Right.
And to still have a 50% rise in asking for exorcisms.
Mm-hmm.
And was that though because they were seeing, what did the media influence that? Like movies and TVs, and maybe that, like they're saying,
Mm-hmm.
because of the spotlight put on by the media. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
looked at your smart aleck 15-year-old kid who grunted at you with their, whatever, and you thought, possession.
Well, I do remember reading about when The Exorcist came out. There were movie theaters in other countries that were blessed by religious figures prior to and after the movie, because even we still have them today, but in the 70s, superstitions were still pretty heavy amongst the human race. So when you're watching a movie about demonic possession and you're seeing this demon manipulate things and whatnot. These people believed 100% that they could come home with a demon just by watching this movie.
Oh, wow.
And they had to cleanse these movie theaters of negative energy because they truly believed that they were going to bring home a negative energy just watching this thing. So it, in a way, it makes sense if we're basing it purely off of the hysteria the movie created, that we would see an increase in exorcisms because there were people who truly believed they were bringing home an evil entity just by merely watching the movie. And when you look at the behind the scenes aspect of people who made the movie, they encountered so many things that we would normally just call bad luck. But there was a lot of things that happened behind the scenes making that movie where it's legendary. You can go on IMDb right now and look up The Exorcist, and it will show you what these people experienced on the movie sets and outside of the movie sets. People died after this movie was made.
Really?
From coincidental incidences, yes.
Oh, weird.
So the stigma of what that movie is, truly scared people to the core because they still held on tightly to those religious beliefs and those superstitions.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all obviously know that Christianity performs exorcisms, which I think though that is not so much like an evangelical Protestant kind of a thing. I think that would be more of a Catholic thing, right? Although I have a true story to tell you.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about Uncle Mike. Let's bring Uncle Mike into the conversation again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were religious people in our lives who thought that he was possessed.
Mm-hmm.
And
I still do.
Wanted to perform an exorcism on him. And that was not Catholic. That was, evangelical. So not just Catholics, but and the way the Christians and Catholics do it is to read, Catholics are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry about that, but I mean like a
they
Protestant.
Just go about it differently.
Like a Protestant version.
Yeah. Different sects have different ways of exorcisms, is what you're trying to say.
yes. Sorry. So they, like, Protestant version would be to read passages out of the Bible, to ask the demon its name, to keep praying and asking the Lord to remove this demon, going in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Catholics do what is called a major exorcism, and they have ritualistic lists of what they have to go through, steps they have to go through, different prayers, different icons, sacraments, and those invoke God, specifically the name of Jesus, to exorcise the demon. And this can happen over years in the Catholic religion. You can have these exorcisms weekly over years to get rid of a demon. Lutheran churches, they have a handbook that they go by to perform exorcisms with. They drive out demons with what they call prayers and contempt for the demon, and they read the Apostles' Creed, and they do their Our Fathers. Hindus perform exorcisms, and they read from one of the 4 holy books of the Hindus, and they do mantras to get the demons to come out. Islam, they do exorcisms, and it is called, now I'm going to butcher this, I'm so sorry. Rugia, Rugia, and it's to repair the damage caused by a seer, which is black magic. And in contemporary Islam, they call it alternative medicine, and it's called an al-tib al-nabawi, and it's called the medicine of the prophet. They have the person lie down, they put their hands on their head, they recite verses from the Quran, although that part's not mandatory. They drink their holy water and put perfumes on them, the person that does not, that do not have alcohol as their base in the perfume. And then they do specific prayers that glorify God. In Judaism, they perform exorcisms. They have to call in someone, a rabbi who has mastered the practice of the Kabbalah. Anybody beneath that is not permitted to perform an exorcism. And then also they have present minyan, which is a group of 10 adult males. They gather in a circle around the possessed person and they recite Psalms 91 3 times. And the rabbi blows a ram's horn to get rid of the demon. In Taoism, they do Chinese rituals, and these priests perform these specific Chinese rituals, and they do chanting and prayers, and they make it sort of a festival to get rid of the demon. In Buddhism, they have a religious ceremony that means literally offering up this person, and it is held on the 29th and the 12th of the Tibetan month. So if you're going to have an exorcism, if you're a Buddhist, there's specific days that they have these ceremonies, and that is when you would go to a temple or a monastery and have this. It's apparently a huge religious dance ceremony to rid you of your demons. And I think that is really interesting that so many different religions basically have the same basic concept of chanting or reading scripture to rid the people of the demons. Mm-hmm. And also interesting to me that Catholics think that, like, these particular religions think that it happens immediately. Catholics can believe that it takes time. You know, if you have a legion, perhaps, or a particularly strong demonic presence, that it would take quite a bit longer. Mm-hmm. So whether you believe these exorcisms work or not, I don't know. We don't know.
Well, I know that it might be true with the other religions, but Christianity and Catholicism in particular, they view a demonic possession as an infestation, as a parasite. And with that, it's attached to you. And with any kind of a parasite or infestation, you're not just going to say a few chant words and it's gone. You need to put time and energy into getting rid of the infestation and get rid of mm-hmm. the attachment. So it seems to make sense in that aspect.
Well, I want to tell you about a couple of famous people that have undergone exorcisms. Salvador Dali had received an exorcism. Of course, he's a sculptor, right? And he had to receive an exorcism after he did a sculpture of Christ. Bobby Jindal. So we're coming real recent history. He was the former governor of Louisiana. I think a lot of us in America will recognize that name. He said in an essay in 1994 that he performed an exorcism on a friend of his. And Mother Teresa underwent an exorcism when she was late in her life, because she said that witnesses said that she was really agitated in her sleep, and she feared that she could be under the attack of a demon. So to think that Mother Teresa went through an exorcism, that's pretty. I never would have, I would have bet on that if somebody had told me that. So that's very interesting.
Well, her works were very deep in religion, so it makes sense. I could see that. I mean, maybe she wasn't possessed, but maybe she was in the beginning stages of being attacked, and luckily for her, people were able to recognize that.
Right. Right. So yeah, or you know, and her beliefs being based in religion, maybe that she thought that the end stages of her life, what was happening to her, could be an attack by a demon, and it was really the end stages of her life. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
This is true too.
You can't know. So I want to talk about one particular serial killer who claimed that he was possessed by a demon. Do you want to talk about something first before I do that, Jory? Anything coming to your mind?
No, I have more to talk about after this, so you're good.
Okay. So this man, his name was Wesley Allen Dodd, and he was a serial killer in the state that I was born in and lived for a long time. And Wesley Allen Dodd, he preyed on small boys. And I've told everybody involved in the podcast that I am not going to describe the crimes that Wesley Allen Dodd performed because I don't want that kind of energy in a podcast. I don't want to attract that kind of attention. But it was horrific in every way possible. And if you want to go look up Wesley Allen Dodd later, be my guest. He was sentenced to death. He was the first man hung in Washington for it had been 100 years since somebody had been hung, because you got to choose between a hanging and a lethal injection, I believe it was. And he chose hanging. Wesley Allen Dodd, in America, when you're sentenced to the death penalty, people, groups, advocates will go to court for you to try and get the charge moved to life in prison, because there's a lot of people who are against the death penalty. And Wesley Allen Dodd begged for these people to not do that. He said that he would not show up in court for these court dates, that he would not acknowledge them, that he had wanted nothing to do with it. And the reason was that he claimed that he became a Christian in prison, which many do, and that he had fully admitted that if he was let out, he was 100% certain that he would not only commit the same crimes again, but he would enjoy it, he would not regret it, and that he was possessed by a demon. And I don't know if he came to believe this because of his newly found religious beliefs. But whatever the case, what Wesley Allen Dodd did to small boys cannot be explained, in my personal opinion. And I'm not a scientist, and I only play a doctor on live streams. But I don't think it can be explained by any type of mental illness. I don't think it can be explained by any type of a bad childhood. What he did was beyond comprehension. And he claimed that he had to die and chose dying by hanging, the worst possible way, and he had the choice of the two choices: go to sleep or be hung, because he needed to kill that demon in him. And we sat around the TV, and it was a huge thing in Washington. We sat around the TV and watched. You don't watch executions, so don't. If you're in the UK, you don't watch executions. But they have coverage outside, and they'll say Wesley Allen Dodd died at 12:01 a.m. And it was really interesting in real time to see this man claim that he was possessed by a demon and he would do it again with no regrets. And you have to wonder about that. Like, that is that true? This man is himself admitting. What do you think, Jory?
I think you would have to have something wrong with you on uh, that large of a scale for you to commit the crimes that he committed. Could it be? Could it? I, it it just seems so fascinating to think that he thought he was so deep in what he believed was a demonic possession. At least not publicly did he even try to at least exorcise the demon from him. Like, he claimed to switch to convert to Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
but he felt that his only option was death.
Yes.
So you would have to really truly believe that there was no getting rid of what was plaguing you for you to know, like, if I go back out. And that's another thing that kind of is funny about mental illness, is a lot of these people don't understand that what they're doing is actually wrong. He
Right.
understood what he was doing was not only wrong, but that he would enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So I think that breaks up the barrier of what is considered a mental illness. That it seems so scary to believe that he knew deep down inside that his only option was death. Like, there was no exorcism. Even converting to Christianity might save his soul in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the now, the only option he felt he had was keep me in prison and kill me, please, because that's the only way that people in the outside world will be protected from me.
Which was basically suicide.
Basically, yeah. So and why that's a whole different religious tangent of whether or not he goes to hell, because in theory he committed suicide. But it's a fascinating case. It really catches the eye to think that this guy didn't, at least in textbook terms, have what we would consider a mental illness, because he knew what he was doing.
Right.
And he knew it was wrong.
Right.
But he believed he was being driven by something evil and demonic. And
Yeah.
the only way for him to stop what he was doing was to be locked up until he died. And so I mean, I would probably lean more in the way of thinking that he might have been possessed, because these murders were something that I don't even think we've seen since. They were
No,
brutal.
we haven't.
They were brutal.
Yeah.
They were monstrous.
Yeah. Yeah. They were above and beyond the pale of your worst idea of what serial killers do. And yeah, to be that terrified. I mean, he was terrified that they might actually let him out. And he would do it again. So he didn't say, "Oh, I had a bad background. I had a terrible childhood." He didn't say, "I have a mental illness." He went, after he had converted to Christianity, and I don't know what his religious background was. It could have been that he had a Christian background in the first place, a basis in that. But yeah, he just it's a demon, and I need to kill it. And the only way he could kill it was to kill him.
Yep.
So
or
that
at least
case
himself be rid of it.
Yeah, that is really, that case right there. It stands out. And by the way, Rob and I next week are going to talk about serial killers, and is it nurture versus nature? And we're going to talk about Wesley Allen Dodd. I'm going to talk about Wesley Allen Dodd. So I don't want to get too much into him, but to me, I've never heard of another, and I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, go ahead and put it in the chats. But I've never heard of another serial killer saying, I'm possessed by a demon. That's my defense. I'm not even going to use a defense. He didn't even use a defense. He was just like, kill me, please.
Well, he wasn't a serial killer, but if you want to also look at what happened in Amityville with the son who shot his mom, his dad, and his brothers and his sisters, and said, I was possessed by a demon.
Is that a true story?
Yeah, that's a true story. He came
Is
out and
it?
said the reason why he killed his family was because he had been hearing voices that were telling him he needed to kill his family, and then he was filled like with this overwhelming rage, this anger, and he picked up a shotgun and he killed his family.
The Amityville story is a true story. That's what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is the Amityville horror.
I mean, not the movie. Doesn't have to be the movie version, but yeah.
Well, what created the ghost story of Amityville was what the murders that took place in that house prior to the Lutzes moving into that house. The Lutzes
and that was a real story.
House. Yes, the murder itself was real.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, it was a family. It was a dad, a mom, and then they had an elder son that lived in the basement, and then there was younger children.
It's always in the basement, by the way. Stay out of the basements.
I think it was a brother and two sisters, maybe. And yeah, he claimed to be possessed by an evil entity, and that's what drove him to kill his entire family. And then later, the Lutzes bought that house, and what occurred to them was what became the Amityville horror. Right.
So the movie presents their story as fact, which I'm not sure actually was. But the story that led up to the basis for their story was a true story.
Yes.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. And historical research shows that house was built on, and this always goes to a lot of ghost stories, was built on Indian land.
Isn't it so strange that a lot of demon things and ghost things are always based on Indian land? I almost feel that I've said it myself, that our house in Casa Grande was built on Indian land. So I've used, and it was a true fact, it is. But isn't it strange that so many of those stories go towards that? I almost feel that it's so disrespectful.
Well, I think if you break it down culturally, because Indians performed I don't want to offend anybody. Native Americans or natives, they performed a lot of ceremonies and prayed to their gods and did things based off of what their religious beliefs were. And if you want to harken back to like portals, like what Ghost Adventures always claims to find, could their religious practices create energies on that particular land that didn't go away? And that's what we experience 200, 300 years later, is the energies that these people created through their religious practices or their intense belief in it, so to speak.
Right. It's just strange to me. And I've heard somebody say once that culturally speaking, she felt offended that so many other cultures, because it's around the world, that we're not the only people who had a native population. Mm-hmm. That a lot of scary, violent things are attributed to being on their land.
Well, if you want to put it in layman's terms, if you're, let's say, a white person living on that particular land, and the spirit of that native person, let's say they passed away in a time where white people were coming in and taking their lands, that's what you know as that being, is what you knew before you passed away. So if you see an invader of your land, especially if they're of a different color than yours, you're probably going to experience an angry haunting, because They're trying to drive you from where they live, from their land. They're still living what they were living when they were alive.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So it's not
Yeah.
trying to say, oh, all the bad things happen on Indian land. You got to break it down to keep in mind that spirits, for the
Historical.
most part, are still human beings. They're just not
Right.
physical human beings anymore. They're
Right.
spiritual, and they still keep what they had with them when they passed.
And that energy.
It's the same thing of like going into a club that used to be a mob hotspot in the 40s. You're probably going to encounter some crazy stuff because mob people died in that building. It's not
Right.
meant to be
Right.
a
Right.
slap to Native American culture. It's just keeping in mind when white people came to this land and we presented peace treaties and then we backed out of them and we started murdering Native Americans. When they were dying, they were seeing us as a plague,
Right.
as us taking their land from them. So of course they're probably going to be a little pissed in spiritual form. It's just because they're still human. They might be dead, but they're still human.
Right. That, you know what, that's a good explanation. You're right. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. So it's not saying I can't remember their last name as a family, but they were on a land that could have had religious practices from Native Americans that opened a portal that invited a non-human entity or a demon into that, not just that house, but that land.
Right.
And therefore was able to whisper to this kid, hey, your family sucks. Hey, why don't you kill your family? Hey, go up there right now and shoot them all to death.
Right. Well, do you want to talk about the modern day possession requirements?
So, as paranormal investigations has evolved from the spiritual movement of the late 1800s and early 1900s into Hans Holzer and everything leading up to now, we've kind of been able to start to establish the signs or what they call stages of demonic possession.
Right.
So when you move into a house and you start experiencing paranormal activity, you're going to start thinking you just have a ghost. And if you're going to eventually be experiencing what's going to be demonic, a demonic haunting, they call this the manifestation stage 1, where you're just hearing and seeing things. Maybe you're hearing scratches on a wall. Maybe you're seeing things move. Maybe you're hearing footsteps. It's very innocent to an extent. It's getting your attention. It's making you start to, and it might just focus on you. Like when you move into a house, let's say you have a family with you. If you're a person that has anything negative in you, you don't believe in yourself, or maybe you're physically ill, it's going to target what it considers the weakest person in a group, and it's just going to pick on you. So you might see all this paranormal activity going around you, maybe one or two other people, but for the most part, it's just going to focus on you, and everybody around you is going to start thinking, oh, you're weird. That's not happening to us, and it starts to isolate you, which is going to make you more and more depressed. Mm-hmm. Once it gets you to that, it moves to stage 2, which is called oppression. Now, in oppression, you're going to start seeing physical attacks. You're going to start seeing the claw marks. You're going to start feeling the slaps, the punches, the being thrown across the room. You're going to start feeling your energy being drained from you. You're going to start making yourself more isolated from friends or family. You're going to start being more irritable. This is where the demon is starting what will become stage 3, which is demonic possession. Now, modern day parapsychologists and demonologists believe that demons want to take everything from you, and that includes your energy and your soul, and eventually kill you, because they're envious of what you have, which is life. You have a soul. You have the ability to feel things. You have the ability to experience sunlight. You have the experience to feel joy and love and happiness. Whereas these entities don't have that ability. All they feel is hatred, and they want to take it away from you. So once they finish stage 2 oppression and they've been able to remove you, at least emotionally and mentally, from your friends and your family, they can now possess you because you're at your lowest point with believing in yourself, both mentally and physically. Once you've become possessed, it's almost near impossible for even an exorcist to get you out of that situation.
And that's level 3?
That's stage 3 is possession.
Okay, wait a minute. From being scratched, it goes to level 3.
Well, oppression is not just being scratched.
But I mean, like,
it
I was
falls under
scratched.
the category. Okay, so
I
yeah.
So I would be in a stage 2.
You would have been considered at least the beginning stages of stage 2, yes.
Whoa, that's out of a 3-stage process.
Out of a 3-stage process, yes.
That is frightening.
Now, I'm not saying that this is a process that takes place within days or months. It could take years.
Oh, good. It's still early.
Well, I mean, there's cases I've seen where it took somebody living in a haunted house like 10 years before they were officially 100% possessed by a demon, or what exorcists considered possessed by a demon, because maybe the entity took its time, or maybe it lay dormant until it found the perfect opportunity. But regardless, there is no timetable of what this demon's capable of, because it's not going anywhere. It's a demon. It's a spirit. It has nothing better to do. So once you become stage 3 and possessed, that's when the demon has taken full control over you, and it starts living through you. It is you. And like I said, once you get to that point, it's a real battle for your soul. And people have died. People have died getting to stage 3 because they haven't been able to be saved. So,
wow.
It's best to try and recognize what you're dealing with. Like, it's hard in stage 1 because you might just think you're dealing with a ghost. But no matter what, if you're dealing with a ghost in any way, shape, or form, it's always best to right away bring in a paranormal team, research the history of your property and of your house. And if the paranormal team is starting to get evidence that suggests that maybe it's not a human entity, that's a human spirit that's haunting your home, you need to get it cleansed right away, because this is not something to be messed around with. These things can take control of your life. And even that's before possession. You will lose family members. You will lose friends because you will isolate yourself from them. You will go 23 hours a day locked in your room because you don't want to be around people. You want to feel pity for yourself. You want to feel sorry for yourself. You want to shut yourself away. And that's where it's getting its energy from.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. So when did this discovery of the 3 stages, when was that starting to be put into place?
I don't think it was put in place scientifically until in more recent times, but I think people, especially in like trained exorcists, have probably known about these 3 stages for a long time. But as far as modernizing goes, it's probably only been within the last 30 years where paranormal investigators have been able to really deduce the difference between what a human entity is trying to do versus what a non-human entity is trying to do, and break down the stages. And even to this day, it's not a perfect science, because, like I said, stage 1, you could just be experiencing regular, it's funny to say regular, but regular paranormal activity. Oh, the lights are flickering. Oh, the door opened. Oh, the water turned on. Something's trying to get our attention. I wonder if it's the former owner, blah, blah, blah. You don't even realize that in stage 1, It's already gone to work. And it's an unfair battle right off the bat. It already has the advantage over you. But we're lucky enough now, at this point in time, to where if you are experiencing the stage 2 symptoms, people can be brought in to help you and hopefully rid you of your attachment before you reach stage 3.
Well, I think that's going to be very scary to a lot of people who have paranormal experiences. You know, like you said, like the quote unquote regular, you know, something moved. There's things go bump in the night. So sort of experiences to realize, like what you said, that something has already gone to work. You're already in a losing battle. And it makes it a lot less fun to talk about at parties when you look at it that way, right?
Well, you always have to be wary of the paranormal in general because you're still dealing with something that's dead or moved on. So even if you never see stage 2 and 3, you're still dealing at least with a deceased person who hasn't moved on to wherever they're supposed to move on. And even that aspect to me is still creepy because you're sharing the same space with something that, unless it wants to show itself, you can't see it, but it can see you. It can interact with you. You can't interact with it. So
right.
The paranormal is always something that you should be wary of, no matter what. Because keeping in mind, let's say this is still let's say it's not even a non-human entity. Let's just break it down to being a human entity. This person was still alive at one point. It still has thoughts. It still has feelings. You could piss it off, and it could still do something to you. Or you could not piss it off, but it's still going to do something to you, and it's always going to constantly make itself known that it's there. Are you really going to want to live in a house for 30 years with something that's constantly going to let it, you know it's there, but there's nothing you can do about it because you can't interact with it?
Yeah, but I do that. Because it follows me.
Right, but let's say for you, it does follow you, but what's the worst you've experienced in the years you've had you've had some scratches
Twice, yes.
Twice, but you've never been possessed, and I'm not going to say your age, but you've been around long enough for, if you were to have been possessed, I think it would have already happened by now. And I guess for people like us, it's something that we get used to.
I'm getting off this and I'm going to call a priest right now, though. I'm like, you can keep talking. I'm going to get out the phone book. By the way, Rob said that he heard that there was 4 stages and that the last stage was that you become integrated with the demon.
Well, integration and possession are pretty much the same thing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I
see.
Yeah, like when a demon, once a demon has full possession of you, people also refer to it as an integration. It's when the demon parasite has complete control over you. Like, your soul is gone, what is you is gone. It's this infestation in your body. The only thing that's you is the physical aspect.
And that's when you can't really be exorcised.
That's when they will try, and then I don't know if there's a way for you to come back at that point. I've never heard or seen of anything where an exorcist has been able to save people once they've hit that brink. And that's pretty much, yeah, like if you're in full integration, full possession, you're probably done. You're probably gone.
And so maybe that's where Wesley Allen Dodd was, in his opinion.
Well, I don't know if he was fully integrated because he was able to understand. He was able to understand that what he was doing was wrong.
Right.
And that he apparently was able to discern that he was carrying an evil inside of him that he couldn't get rid of. So he might have had episodes of let's say what he says is right and he's possessed. He probably had blackout episodes where when he committed these murders, he wasn't aware of it himself because it was the demonic entity committing these murders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not so much unaware of it as so much he couldn't control it.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't 100% integrated yet. Like, he could still come back to himself.
Right.
Which would lend to the fact that he wasn't dead at that point. He was still battling his soul, and you could say he battled for his soul until he died.
Right.
And that's how he chose to battle for his soul, is by killing himself, technically.
Wow. I'm still looking up a priest, by the way.
Well, you don't necessarily...
Feel free to go get ordained any second now, Doreen.
You don't necessarily need a priest. If you feel like you need to be cleansed, there's you can go get sage and burn sage in your living space. And sage is supposed to have the ability to drive negative energies from your living space. You'll probably
did you hear that, producer Jeremy? Are you still here, or did you run out to the local health food store?
I've got sage. I've got thyme. I've got
holy water.
I brought celery. Can we burn that too? I've got salt. I have pepper,
allspice.
I have oregano.
I got some Cajun spices up in here.
I brought Tabasco sauce. I don't know if it'll work, but whatever. I'll throw everything at this thing. The kitchen sink. Pull that out.
Got some ketchup, some mustard,
some Szechuan sauce.
Okay, so is there anything specifically about demons that you think we haven't covered that you want to talk about before we go on to mental illnesses?
I just want, before we go on to the mental illness part, don't feel like, for people who are out there listening to this, that feels like they might be going through something that is demonic. Don't think that you're gonna lose. I'm not trying to say that. If you are able to recognize that what you're going through is not a typical haunting, you can recognize that you have the power to still combat what is in your home. Whether you want to contact a religious figure, even contact the paranormal group. In the paranormal group, if they can discern that what you're going through is a demonic attachment, they will contact religious figures on your behalf. You can take it upon yourself. You got to remember, your living space is your living space. That is your home. You have ownership of it. You have ownership of yourself and your soul. As long as you keep yourself in good, positive energy, and you find and you can recognize what you're going through, you can win. You can drive this entity out. Don't think you're alone, and don't think you're already done just because I've explained to you what the 3 stages of demonic haunting is. Up until the point of the demon 100% possessing you and integrating into your soul, you have a fighting chance. So for all those people who will feel like they are in a battle, don't give up, fight, and bring people in to help you. Just like with any war, numbers help. So don't be discouraged. Don't let my mom scare you by her typing in the background, looking up priests.
Oh, I've just called one. Sorry. Put you on mute for a minute.
Don't be discouraged. There are people who will help you.
You know what might be interesting along those lines is, because I've had that experience. We have a local paranormal group where I live. Mm-hmm. And to have a podcast where they came on and sort of did an investigation, wouldn't that be good?
Of your house?
Yeah.
During the podcast?
Yeah. Or they did an investigation and then they came onto the podcast and they revealed to us what their findings were.
Yeah, I don't know if a live investigation would work, but I could see you having somebody come in and investigate. Most, if not all, paranormal groups should be nonprofits. Um, so you can bring them in probably free of charge and have them take a look at your house. And if they want to join the podcast, they can.
Well, you guys tell me in the chat and give me thumbs up if you want to have me try and have a paranormal group come over and tell me what they're and you and my co-hosts what their findings are, because that would be so interesting, I think. I think I'm gonna work on that, Jory.
Okay.
That would be really fun. Fun might not be the word I'm looking for, but interesting. So, is there anything else you want to talk about before we talk about the mental disorders and the neurological disorders that have? Oh, and Rob says we could do a three-way podcast, and that would be fun. That would be great, Rob. We could all be on and get the results and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be awesome. So you guys leave your comments, leave your thumbs up if you would like to have that happen, because I think I'll go to work trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting.
Yeah. So is there something else you want to touch on that has to do with demons before we move on to what? Well, I guess it's been 2 hours, so
Yeah, we can move on to mental illness. We've been babbling on about all sorts of different stuff. So
okay. Well, yeah, that's okay.
yeah, I don't think I have anything more to touch on. Um, we can move on.
Okay. So as we've gotten out of, tribes and become modernized, and science has, you know, been science, we've realized that a lot of things that used to be called demon possession were in actuality somebody who had um, either a mental illness or a neurological disorder. As an example, and I'm not discrediting this story, so don't pound me about it. But in the Bible, a boy is taken to Jesus. This boy is mute. He's his body is jerking and he's foaming at the mouth. And he was taken to Jesus to perform an exorcism. And scientists say that the way it's described in the Bible is a classic case of an epileptic seizure. So epilepsy, aside from that, was often thought to be demon possessed because the person's body was doing things they didn't want them to. The person's eyes would roll back in their head. Like they said, they would foam at the mouth. They weren't present in their own body, so to speak. So somebody with epilepsy was considered to be possessed by a demon, oftentimes. Also, somebody who was psychotic or schizophrenic, people who heard voices, who heard them tell voices who told them to do harm or to harm themselves, just in general, hearing voices and schizophrenia and psychosis. You can even see things. There's a classic modern age story of this girl who was schizophrenic, and she would see cats, see animals, which is interesting because it kind of harkens back to a lot of the history of demons. Is that some cultures believed you would see animals, and that would be the demon, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would make them unhealthy. So, and she would name her cats like numbers. That's number 7. That's number 2. And people like that would be considered to be demon possessed back then. Also, dissociative identity disorder, which is described as if you look in the mirror, you don't see that as being you. You see it as being somebody other than you, which can also be a side effect of certain antibiotics. If you've ever been on those and had that that issue, it's a side effect of one of those.
Yeah.
But to not feel like, not understand that you are you, to feel outside of your body, which, if you're thinking about this from non-scientific explanations, you can understand why clearly these would have been considered something supernatural, paranormal, demons related, right?
Oh yeah.
Also, a neurological disorder such as Tourette syndrome, because oftentimes the person with Tourette's is not able to control their body, their voice, the words they come out of their mouth. And I can say that these things are not just historical. These things happen to people today. Today, in this day and age, there are people so ingrained that science doesn't matter and that these illnesses aren't real, that they still believe that things such as schizophrenia or psychosis or a neurological disorder such as Tourette syndrome is demon possession. And I can tell you this for a fact because I have a child who has Tourette syndrome. And 2 times in my child's life, she's been told that she's possessed by demons. In modern history, people had the balls to tell a child that she was possessed by demons. That is unbelievable to me. And if you're listening to me and you ever feel like you have the need to tell somebody that, don't. It doesn't help. Trust me. There's no helping in that. But to have people that is so close to burning witches still that it's unbelievable that in this day and age we can have a person think that if you have Tourette's, you're demon possessed. One particular man said that he worked with somebody who had Tourette's, and now in my daughter's case, if you met her, you would probably not notice that she has Tourette's. She's medication helps her tremendously, and she's never had the outbursts. This is going to be every podcast I have to talk about medical things, apparently. So this one's for you, Rob.
I will say that my sister does have the mouth of a sailor, though. I'm just throwing that out there.
She may have gotten that from being around you and me. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Not so much demon or Tourette's, just...
Yeah. Just in conversation.
Yeah. Intelligent people cuss. Let's just keep that in mind.
Scientific studies say
I must be really, really smart, and so is my sister.
Yeah, I'm brilliant. So, I don't remember where I was now. So this man, he said he, worked with somebody. Tourette's. Only a small percentage of people with Tourette's actually have the outburst. That's a very, very small percent. The rest of them have small body tics. And OCD, by the way, was something that was considered demon possession, is what was considered a tic, stuff like that. But this man that we knew, he worked with a man who had Tourette's, and he had the verbal yelling out of words and stuff. And he said that he was so afraid of this man and his demon possession that he told his bosses that he wouldn't work with him anymore. I just thought, wow, out of the two of you, who actually looks more crazy right now to that boss?
Yeah.
And then I had somebody who taught her karate, who was also very religious, thought they would be helpful by letting us know that it's probably demon possession. So My point being that it's clear why some of these illnesses back in the day when you didn't know anything, right? If somebody's, especially something like epilepsy or schizophrenia or whatever, anything where you can lose your control of what's happening to you, you don't have control over it. What you're seeing, what you're hearing, what your body's doing, what you're saying would easily be attributed to something paranormal.
I think that when we didn't have the understanding, it was fine. I don't want to say fine, but it was understandable because we didn't have the technology. We have the technology now. We have the medical expertise now to discern mental illnesses from demonic possessions, and it this is the part where it makes me frustrated with people with strong religious beliefs. Now, I'm not against people with religious beliefs, but in the case of my sister being told that she's possessed by a demon when she just has Tourette syndrome, it casts a light into the fact that we as a people need to be more aware, not just of science and religion, but of people around us and what we say to them, because these things have consequences. What you know, it can start a chain reaction of something in my sister that could lead to something bad if you continuously make her believe that she's possessed by a demon. She just has Tourette syndrome, and that's just her. We're not talking about the millions of other people who have mental disorders who are being told, "Oh, you're just possessed by a demon." We're now in a time where we need to start separating fact from fiction. I'm not saying that there's no more demonic possession anymore. What I'm saying is we are now advanced enough as humans, as people, where we, even if we have religious beliefs, need to start saying, "Hey, this person has this," and not just, "Oh, you're possessed by a demon. You need to go see your a pastor, or you need to go see somebody and get this demon out of you." It's that kind of thought that will kill people. Just to harken back to something that happened in our family, we had a family member pass away from heart issues, where a medical team could have provided her a service, but her pastor told her no. Her job was still to stay here and preach God's word, and that she didn't need medical procedures done on her because God would heal her, and she passed away.
He told her that he had a dream that God was going to use her in his work to preach that she'd been healed by the word of God and did not get treatment, and she died.
Yes, and it's thinking like that kills people, not just physically but mentally. These are things that could lead people to suicide because they're not being accepted by you, because you as a religious person are telling them there's no gray area. You're either a good Christian person or you're possessed by a demonic soul and you're going to die and you need to be saved by Jesus. There needs to be an understanding that demonic possession, guess what, is rare, and probably not what's happening to somebody who's hearing voices. They're probably schizophrenic and just need a little help and understanding. And if you can steer them that way, it will do wonders, not just to an individual, but to a society. We need to start thinking of ourselves as an entirety. You can still have your faith in God. You can still have your faith in Jesus. You can still have your faith in whatever it is you believe in, but turn it into a positive. If you feel like this person has issues, even if you feel it is a demonic possession, at least rule out the medical, the science first.
And if you haven't been asked, don't give your opinion.
And don't give your opinion. Nobody needs what your religious opinion is shoved down your throat. Be a friend, be a family member, be a supportive shoulder. Christianity is supposed to be the ultimate. If you need a shoulder to cry on, my shoulder is here. I am here for you. Let us discuss what we can do for you. So that's what it needs to be. We need to make sure that if this person doesn't have a mental illness and we can now recognize demon possession, then we take care of the demon possession. If we can recognize that it's not a demon possession and it's a mental illness, then we need to take care of the mental illness. We need to first and foremost take care of people.
Yes.
Because only as a people can we not only combat physical and mental illnesses, but together with positive energy, positive beliefs, we can also defeat evil demonic entities trying to harm us, trying to hurt us.
That's right. That we are a community. We are one people. And rather than it's us against them, if you're not with me, you're my enemy. We can have disagreements, we can have different beliefs, and we still don't have to harm people with them. Because we are one people. And I think that a lot would be solved if we came together and understood that it's better to be helpful than divisive. And that was really good, Jory. I'm glad you said that.
Well, it just goes to the adage, if you break it down to war terms, divided we fall.
Right.
And if you think of it in a spiritual sense, if we're divided spiritually, we're going to fall to demons.
Yes.
If we come together spiritually, we're not going to. But we also have to keep in mind that there's more than just God and Satan. There's more than just demons and angels. There's science. There's illnesses. There's physical and mental.
Yes, both can exist. You can hold both beliefs. You can hold both beliefs, both religious beliefs and scientific beliefs, and they can fit together in one mind. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. And like you said, if you see somebody with a mental illness, rather than inflict more damage by commenting that it must be a demon possession or something evil, or they give you an evil feeling, rather than doing that, invoke science. And we see a lot of things happen because of people with mental illness, and because it's a secret, and because people are ashamed to admit it, that a lot of it goes untreated. A lot of people commit suicide because of it. A lot of danger comes out of treating it as though it's something to not be talked about. It's a family secret, and we just shh. So recognize that there is science, there is religious beliefs, there are demon possessions, and there are schizophrenics, and they're not the same thing.
So, Rob just asked, what if you have both mental health problems and ghost problems, spiritual problems? And then there was a chatter that said, then see a therapist or talk to an adult or a friend that will eventually be solved, or try calling a priest. I think if you suffer from, if you understand that you have mental issues, like in Rob's case, he suffers from PTSD from his time in the military, amongst other issues, but you can still recognize that you're having paranormal issues going on in your life.
Yeah.
You're still able to recognize that you're not, that you have issues within you, but they're not so severe that you can't recognize, or you can't discern what's real and what's not real. If you're still experiencing paranormal activity, and you know deep down in your core that's not the issues that you're dealing with, then you should still contact paranormal investigators, or contact a priest, or even take it upon yourself to cast or to do a blessing of your own home.
And if you're not sure which is which, Rob, I know you, and obviously, I think you know which is which. And if people are on the precipice of not knowing which is which, and maybe they haven't been diagnosed with a mental disorder, I think that the advice that Penny Plays gave was really good. See a therapist, or talk to an adult or a friend, or and possibly a priest. There's routes for you to go. I would start with a therapist. an adult, a friend, start talking to somebody who knows you, that you can trust, somebody that you can trust to be honest with you.
I think
And go
what
ahead.
would be smart, if you needed help in discerning whether or not the paranormal activity that you were experiencing was your mental disorder or if it was real,
Yeah.
if you had a really good friend, have them stay with you
Yeah.
for a number of days, between 1 to 2 to a week, and see if they experience the same things you experience. Because if they experience the same things you experience, now you're having somebody else experience it, which takes away the interference of your mental disorder, and it
Right.
becomes real.
Well, the thing is that if you're having something happen in your house, there's a good chance that we have a sixth sense. And if somebody comes over and they know that you've been experiencing something in your house, or even if they don't, that they could be feeling that there's something going on, there's something dark. And I want to say, I don't want it to be off topic, but I want to say that having these conversations on these podcasts has been very interesting to me in the last few weeks, because 2 weeks ago we had a podcast where we had some very strange things happening in the background that Rob and I talked about last week. Last week at 1 hour and I think it's 12 minutes. If you started at 1 hour and 11 minutes, Jory caught on during the podcast, but because of a communication kerfuffle, I wasn't told about it. There is a voice, a child's voice that says, "Mommy," clearly. And I think it's been very interesting and a little bit frightening that that kind of stuff has been happening while we're having these conversations. And I almost feel like it's to shut things down. Um, but about your friend, if you have a friend that you trust that comes to stay with you, I mean, we're open about this stuff to people. We're open. Producer Jeremy, he was told about that before he ever came over here, probably, but, and has experienced some things. So if they can be with you and see what you're experiencing, that's good too. I think that's a good job too, Jory.
Well, it helps in the aspect of, if you're confused whether or not you're just experiencing, like in Rob's case, he suffers from PTSD, so he might see shadow figures, but they might be playing out something that happened to him while he was serving, um,
In
with
the
his unit
military.
in the military. So if he can bring somebody in who can then see the shadow figures too, now it becomes something that's more than just his PTSD. And the fact that he can recognize it eliminates the mental disorder from it entirely, because you're still thinking clear enough to be able to discern what's real and what's not.
Right. And I'm so glad that you said that, because okay, because everybody, I have a Facebook page, it's Exit Light Facebook page. Maya will put the link in there. Rob also has a Facebook page, and it's called Paranormal and Supernatural World. But Rob posted a video in the Exit Light Facebook page this week, and he was talking about shadow figures, and you can see the shadow figures at the same time. Rob's looking in the camera, and he's talking, and he stops and says, "There. Did you see that? Was that just me?" But it's not just him. You can see it. And when he has videos of his daughter, he has one particular daughter who I'm not going to get deep into, but has had the shadow figure experiences. And when he does videos of her, you can see orbs floating around her that aren't there when he films and she's not there. So if you guys are interested in seeing that type of thing, do go to my page and to Rob's page and ask Rob questions about it, because he's very interested in this type of thing and has had that experience, does have the PTSD, does see the shadow figures, and I know that Rob would have no problem answering questions for you about the discernment between a PTSD situation and a shadow figure situation. And I have suffered from depression and still had, you know, experiences with paranormal and supernatural, but I could discern the difference. I can discern the difference of what those two were. It never was confusing to me whether it was my like my depression. But if you are in a schizophrenic and experiencing these things, well, obviously that would be confusing. And so that's a completely different or just situation. And if you are a family member of somebody going through that, then I would suggest that, or a friend, that you help them get help with that. Anyway, it's been 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And every podcast we go into something where I play a doctor on a podcast. It started, Rob, with the whole diabetes thing. So if you guys have any questions that you would like to open up right now for us to answer, now would be the time to do that. And while you're doing that, I want to tell you that if you head on over to Twitch, and if you want to start an account, my Twitch, to look for me on Twitch, is twitch.tv/the exit light. It's all lowercase, it's all one letter. If you follow me, when we do move over to Twitch, you will be notified by email, and you will be notified by Twitter if you have one. And we will be moving over there pretty soon. We're trying to get everything set up, but I wanted to give you guys time to make the change. Also, remember that it is completely free. So there is no charge for getting a Twitch account. You can also watch it without having a Twitch account.
I just signed up today. I think today or yesterday.
Okay, good. Yeah. So we want to give you guys plenty of time to head over there and do that. Jeremy will be able to do a lot of stuff with editing, and he's super excited about that, to amp it up a little bit. And we hope that you guys will follow us over there and get the notifications. I'll also put notifications here on YouTube so that you know when we're going to go live over there. I'll do like a little promo video, and then the videos will also be put back up onto YouTube. But if you want to be involved in the conversation live as it's happening, I would recommend going over to Twitch so that you guys can keep up with the conversation, and we have a lot of fun with you in the chats and seeing what you guys talk about, and knowing that you are enjoying the content. So also I have a Patreon account. Mike put the link up to that. As always, that is not a requirement at all. My content is free. That is only if you care to do that. And if you do, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And if you do not, that is completely fine. I thank you for being interested in my content, coming to these live streams, watching them when the video has been put up after the live stream, and subscribing. If you're not subscribed, please do so. Please click that bell. Subscribers are not being notified when their content providers put their content up. That's a glitch that's going around YouTube again. So please click that bell so that you can be notified the second I put content up and the second we go live. And click that thumbs up. The more thumbs up we get, the more likes we get, the more you guys talk and leave comments, the more we are put in the recommendations. I am under review to become a YouTube partner again. So that is exciting news. I hit my goal. So when I become a YouTube partner, I'm going to, and my monetization is put back on, we are going to do a gift card giveaway to Amazon. So look forward to that. You have to be subscribed to be able to win that. It is very real. I've given away several gift cards, and everybody who has received one can go ahead and comment sometime and say that you have received it. It is real. It is free money for you to spend however you want to on Amazon. And that sounded exactly like a commercial. Jory, thank you for being my co-host tonight. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a fascinating topic, and I think that everybody probably learned everything they wanted to know about demons and more.
Yeah, I think so. And not to interrupt you, Mom, but to go back to when you were talking about your last podcast. So I was in the chats listening to the podcast, and Rob was you were discussing vampires, and Rob was discussing his belief in vampirism, starting with Judas. And it was the very tail end of that, and I heard a little boy say, "Mom," and I texted moderator Maya, who's my sister. So I was like, "Hey, I think I just heard a little boy say 'mom' to mom." And you were, I think you called me a couple hours later,
Mm-hmm.
and you were like, "Oh, how was the podcast? How did it go?" And I'm like, "When's she gonna ask me? When's she gonna ask me?" And finally, I had to tell you, like, I heard a little boy call you mom on the podcast, and so you were able to go back,
Mm-hmm.
find the discussion you and Rob were having, and hear it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Which, um, we're when we were talking about demonic entities, we were talking about validation. It validated to me because I thought maybe I heard a glitch, maybe I thought I heard something different, but you heard it too.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty cool to hear. And you've been talking about how you've been having that experience before, about how you'll hear a little boy say "mom" or "mommy" to you, but there'll be nothing there. So to hear it myself through a podcast stream 2 states away was really interesting.
Well, that was the thing that was very, in particularly interesting to me was because, well, first off, I've heard it. I've showed it to several people. Rob heard it as well. It clearly says that, and what was particularly interesting to me is the fact that I have said this story so many times, is that I always hear a little boy's voice calling for mom or mommy, and to have that caught on this podcast where other people could hear it, that was some validation for me too, because like I said, I understand being cynical and saying I want to hear proof, I want to see proof. So start at 1 hour 11 minutes of last week's podcast, and you will hear a child's voice talking to me. And hold on a second, I'm supposed to look at what Rob says. Oh yeah, and um along those lines, Rob and I chat through Facebook Messenger. And the way we talk is to record for a minute and we send it. Then we record for a minute and we send it. It's probably not the fastest way to communicate. But I had been listening to what something I sent to see if my microphone was glitching, and I heard something like a grrr, and I dismissed it because I do that sometimes. Most people would be like, what the hell was that? But I'm just like, okay. And a couple minutes later, I was talking, and Rob got a message, and he said, "Tracy, stop. Before you send me another message, stop and listen to your recording." And there was very clearly some sort of a voice or a growl, something that wasn't in the room. So it really been super interesting the last few weeks to have these things occur and to have the validation that other people are experiencing them. Rob and I immediately said, "Let's stop talking now." We literally said, "Okay, we're done. I gotta go by." But if you guys want to experience that too, go back to last week's podcast, experience it, and get a little bit of what we're talking about. So thank you, Jory. Thank everybody who showed up for tonight. I really appreciate your support. I can't say it enough. This has been a lot of fun doing these podcasts. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think you've had a
cool.
lot of fun too, right?
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's fun to. I don't really get to talk about paranormal topics in great detail like this because everybody around me believes, but I don't think they care. So to be able to like really break down my belief system in the best way that I can describe it without offending everybody, it's fun. It gives me a chance to kind of let loose the old wheels in that area.
I really enjoy it. Next week, like I said earlier, Rob and I are going to be discussing serial killers and nature versus nurture. So if you are interested in serial killers, which is something I find fascinating, then show up for next week. Jory will be in the chat and he'll get to put his 2 cents worth in too. And I guess we'll say goodnight. What do you think, Jor?
Yeah. Good night. Thanks to everybody who contributed to our chat, making it more interesting for us. Sorry if we offended anybody religiously, by the way.
Yeah, we don't want to offend anybody religiously, nobody religiously. So if that did happen, it's totally and completely unintentional. I happen to be a religious person myself, so that would be totally unintentional. We just want to talk about paranormal stuff, and that happens to include religious aspects.
Yeah, hard to talk about the paranormal without getting a little bit into religion. So
yeah, and particularly when we're talking about demons.
Yeah, it's never a knock on people with religious beliefs. It's more of just a general talk of breaking down, human experiences. So
yeah, which is why I wanted to. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't think we're, at least me anyways, are bashing anybody. It's just trying to break things down for us to understand, at least try to understand what we go through and why we go through it.
Yeah. Well, the only way to understand it is to talk it out and get other people's opinions. And the reason I wanted to include so many other religions is because, I don't want to offend people by leaving them out. Mm-hmm. And so please don't be offended that I brought your religion in either. It's just that you cannot talk about this topic without religious history.
Yep.
So, all right, you guys. Thank you. I will see you next Wednesday with Rob, and have a good night.
He's the UK host, so remember it's an earlier start time.
Oh, you're right. That will be 4 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and 10 p.m. British Summer Time. So for those of you in the UK, 10 p.m. for you guys, an easier night to put in because it's like 4:30 there a.m. They're in Thursday right now. So I really appreciate you hanging out. All right. Good night, everybody.